I'm back. I'm going to paint the eyes now, starting with the white part of the eyes. I'm going to use, I don't know, I've got a smaller brush here. A filbert, a small filbert. No, that's not it. Here it is. Okay. And I have prepared some colors on my palette. This is an extra palette that I have. It's a Stay Wet palette, so I can mix colors and they'll stay wet. So I have blended some of the colors together, but I think I'm just gonna, this is a nice gray that I created by mixing my smoked pearl with just a little bit of Payne's gray. And I'm going to start with the gray shading color. This is starting to dry out a little bit. And I'm going to do the edges, shade the edges, and then highlight the middle. And I've got a little bit of retarder medium here. And I'm going to blot that off my brush. And pick up some paint with just the tip of the brush. If the paint is sticking, let's see. Oh, you know what? I forgot my optimizers. Can't really see what I'm doing. Where are those optimizers? Kind of rounding the corners. To accentuate the roundness of the eyeball. Okay, I'm going to let that dry for just a little bit, and I'm going to go find my optimizers and do the highlighting when I come back. Okay, I'm back. It's not completely dry. I'm going to load my brush, the tip of my brush, the same way I did before, with the retarder, and then blot, and then pick up some paint with the tip of the brush. And I think I'll turn the head over because the lightest highlight is at the bottom. Now, one way to obscure brush strokes, if you don't want those little brush strokes, is to take a blender and just gently pounce up and down. Okay? So later on, I'll probably want to touch up the whites again and maybe even highlight them more with some brighter white. Maybe not, I'll just wait and see, but usually the whites get a little bit messy while I'm working on the irises, so I'll probably add a little bit more. Well, I will, I'm sure, be adding more, but this is just kind of a base coat to get started with. So I'll be back in a minute. Hi, I'm getting ready to start painting the eyes, but the first thing I want to do is talk a little bit about the gaze technique. And right now we're looking at a factory doll, a vinyl doll that was made in the factory. And I want to show you the difference, or have you compare the expression of this doll with one of the studio dolls, portrait dolls, that was made in our studio. This is a porcelain doll that was painted quite a while ago. And I want you to just notice maybe what is different about this expression and this expression. Okay, when I come back, I'll talk about that a little bit more. Hi, I'm looking at a lesson that I prepared when I was teaching eye painting 10 or 15 years ago, explaining the gaze technique briefly. And it says one of the things that distinguishes a portrait doll from just a doll is, meaning the factory doll, is the naturalistic expression. A doll usually has a blank stare, like the doll that we were looking at earlier. If the two eyes are centered in the center socket, a blank stare will result. So if you center both eyes exactly in the middle of the eye opening, you get a blank stare. This is a bird's eye view of the doll with the eyes centered in the middle of the eye. If one eye is centered in the other eye, then the other eye must move toward the focal point to a slight degree in order for the gaze of the two eyes to meet. So in order for the two eyes to be focusing on a point, one of the eyes has to move in a little bit. And that gives the eyes a focus. And if you look at, sometimes you'll look at a photograph and you'll see that one of the eyes is kind of in the middle and the other one is turned in. These eyes are focusing. This child is focusing on the camera, and so her eyes are focusing on a point. And so I've had to try to find a way to convey this idea and teach how to paint eyes so that they're focused. So one of the things that we used to do is we would, and I guess we could try this now, is we would find the exact center of both eyes and do a very light cross hatch in the middle, like halfway from top to bottom, halfway from side to side. And then we would plot the center of the pupil, making sure that if one eye was centered, the other one was slightly inside the center. And if one eye was outside of the center, the other was a little bit more outside the center. And I believe, I know, if a child is looking directly at the camera, then what you'll have is both eyes will be just a little tiny bit inside of that center line. And they're also usually a little bit above the center of the line that goes horizontal, it's the horizontal line. So when I come back, we're going to try the gaze technique. Okay, see what I did? I made a crosshatch right in the middle of each eye, and then I plotted a circle right in the middle of this crosshatch, and this one I plotted the circle just inside of it. So this eye is looking straight ahead, but this eye is turned in slightly so that the focus point meets someplace in front of the eyes. So I'm going to create a pupil by circling each of these two circles. I'm going to try to construct a circle that is equal distance from the center of this circle. And then from there, I'm going to draw a circle that will be the outline of the iris. So, be right back. Okay, I'm going to mix some Payne's Gray with some water. I find that this color is a good color to start with, no matter what color eyes I'm painting. Although I may gray it down more for some eyes, but for a lot of eyes, I just start with the watered down Payne's Gray. We're going to build up the colors very gradually by watering down the paint. And I'm going to load my brush like I did before and put some retarder medium in the brush, and then pick up some paint with the tip. Oops. And that's really light paint, but it allows me to see the expression without applying a big gob of paint that's going to be difficult to change if I don't like what I see. I'm going to make the pupils fairly large. constantly have to look back and forth to see if they're the same size. We've already got a little bit of an expression showing up. Okay, painting eyes, you have to be mindful of the things you learned in algebra. The points of the circle are equal distance from the center, and that's what creates a round shape. And the iris is a circle that is concentric with the center and the edge of the pupil. So all the points along the iris are equal distant from the points along the edge of the pupil. So when we paint the edge of the iris, we have to follow this curvature and keep the same distance. So when we run into the eyelid, we have to imagine that that curve is going up underneath the eyelid and then coming down on the other side, and part of that circle is hidden by the eyelid. So I'm going to start trying to kind of sketch the edge. Stopping at the lid. Now I have my basic shapes, and I can continue to use my techniques to refine these as I go. Correct little irregularities as they develop, and I always want to put the paint where I want the most color. So I start at the top of the eye where the shadow is. Leaving a highlight below in this area. Okay, I'm going to take a little break and I'll be back in a minute. I'm looking at a close-up of this eye, and I just wanted to point out some things. I don't know the best way to do this or the best way to teach how to do it, but notice how the edge of the iris is a fuzzy line. It's not a hard edge where it stops. It's just a really soft fuzzy line. So to achieve that, I use the technique of building up with light colors and not continuing to darken the very edge, but leave a little bit of that lighter color along the edge of that. And also I want you to notice that the pupil is kind of in the middle of this kind of sunburst shape. I like to do this kind of detail, and just notice some of the details and imagine how to achieve this with paint. I can see turquoisey colors in here. I can see gray colors. I can even see on the photograph a little bit more of a purplish tint. And the one thing that I like to do, which is not apparent on this photograph, because probably a bright light was used from the front, but I like to paint a shadow at the top underneath the lid that is on the whites of the eye and also on the colored part of the eye, because it just creates a softer look. It kind of takes away that starry look. So remember to study your photographs and get inspired to paint realistically. Okay, I'm just going to keep going with that transparent color, and I'm going to try to create that little sunburst effect and add a little shadow, refine these lines a little bit more if they're not, and I'll show you another technique for refining the lines. You're just gradually correcting, like for example here, it looks to me like this is a little bit wider than this. I want to center that pupil a little bit better, or maybe I'll have to move this line a little bit. I'm constantly studying to see where I need to make corrections. Are the two eyes the same size? Is the curvature correct? If this curves in too quickly, it's going to give it a different expression. It's not going to be natural looking. So lots of different things to observe as we go along painting. So I'm going to get my paints and get ready. Be right back. I want to show you some of the brushes that I like to use when I'm doing this detail work on the eyes. Of course, my favorite one for a very long time has been the Winsor Newton Series 7 Triple Aught. It's a very high quality brush. I've been using these for over 30 years and they're still my favorite. And these, the Low Cornell, I've been using the liner. I use the liner for making the outline of the iris and the pupil, and that's a very good brush. And for really tight spots, I sometimes use the spotter. These are the smallest size they make, the 18-aught. The liner is also the 18-aught size, and then sometimes I even use the script liner, the brush that we use for eyebrows and eyelashes, for really fine detail when I'm painting the eyes. So I'm just going to work on this a little bit more, starting at the top. And see that as I add layers, the color darkens a bit. I'm not going to draw the line all the way out to the edge because I want to keep that light feathery edge. Sometimes I use a fan technique for shading up at the top, by just starting at the very top where I want the darkest color and then fanning out from side to side so that most of the paint gets deposited at the top, and as I come down to the sides, there's less paint, so the color is lighter. And the other thing that I really like about the acrylic paints that you could never do with porcelain china paints is you can use opaque color to cover up what's underneath. And often I use an opaque color to refine a line, and after I decide what color I'm going to paint the eye, I decide on a color that's going to be the undertone, and I would like to give this eye a slightly greenish undertone. So I'm going to use some of the color I mixed before. It's antique green and smoked pearl, and it makes a very soft gray green. And I'm going to put some of this color in the lightest area of the eye, and at the same time I can also smooth and refine the shape of the iris and the pupil as I'm applying the opaque paint. Use a little bit of retarder. Okay, now I'm going to go back to my thin down Payne's Gray and work on the shadow at the top and the that center pupil area. sort of a shadow. There's sort of a shadow around the pupil. I think of it as a shadow, but it's kind of a fuzzy effect. Little radiating strokes of color. And then I use a radiating stroke at the top to create the shadow. So the shadow kind of merges with the pupil. Whoop. Start to create a little bit of texture in the way of lines. Remember to keep that natural look. Don't want to get too mechanical with the lines. Keep them random and irregular. I'm going to put a little bit more color in my paint. And clean my brush, go into the retarder, pick up paint with the tip of the brush. I'm still using the liner because I'm thinking about these lines. Little radiant strokes. Detail. I'm darkening the top part, putting most of the paint on the top, keeping the lower part of the iris light. Oh, just for fun, here's something I was going to show you. If your blue paint is light enough, it's diluted enough, you can use it to shade the lips. The corners of the mouth. You don't want the lips to be blue, you want them to be a little bit on the purplish side. So this Payne's Gray works well for creating that purplish shadow in the corner of the mouth. And if you water it way down, the upper lip is in shadow. Now don't paint the lips blue, just put it on really, really faint so it kind of just shades the color that's there. Take your cues from your photographs. See the shadow color in the back and the upper lip, how it's in shadow. I applied a blue over the red that was there to create that shadow. Okay. When I look at this eye on this monitor, I see a luminous quality in here. It looks like a brighter blue in certain areas around the middle of the eye. And so I'm just going to introduce just a tiny bit of a brighter blue, watered way, way down. And work that in. I try to keep the colors natural. So I tend to select muted colors, but a little touch of a brighter color. Some eyes have this color along the edge. but usually there's some green or yellow also. Okay, now I want to do the pupils yet. Maybe I'll go ahead and do the pupils because I'm pretty happy with the way these eyes are shaping up. So I'm going to go back to the center of the pupil. Find the very center again. And put a dot in the center. I'm using just black on my brush, just on the tip of the brush from my palette. Water it down so it's a good consistency for painting a line. And then to help create the round shape, I'm going to draw a line going up and a line going down and a line going to each side, attempting to keep those lines about the same length. This helps me visualize to make my circle. Okay, and now I just have to fill in the circle 1/4 at a time. Now if I look at it and I don't think it's quite in the middle, I can make some adjustment. Okay. Load my brush again. Start in the middle. Remember that's the length of those lines. Okay, my paint needs a little more water. It's kind of thick and I'm not getting enough paint on the tip of my brush because the paint on my palette is starting to get a little too thick, so I'm adding some water to it off camera. Now I'll go again, retarder, tip of the brush. That's better. Okay. The next thing I want to do is to shade the upper part with a deeper color. So painters know that to create a shadow, you take the color and you add the opposite color to create a deeper shadow. So what I like to add to the blue is brown, because brown has the other colors, the red and the yellow, in it, and the burnt umber is nice and dark, so I can create a nice color for shading on the blue. I'm going to get my slant bed palette here, just a minute. I'm starting to get more colors, so I need to do some mixing. Okay. Payne's Gray. Burnt umber. Just enough water to keep it from drying out for a little while. And then the medium shade in between. Oop. Okay, these are going to be my shadow colors for painting the shadow under the lid. I'm going to try this color. This is just the brown. I like that better. This eye is still wet. Oops. I'm going to pick up some of that wet paint. Oops. I see something I'm not pleased with. There's a spot right here where the brown is a little too dark. You can make changes with a toothpick. Just moisten the toothpick and just very gently remove that surface color. You can even do a little bit of blending with the toothpick. Texturing. Okay, I'm going to go back and put some more blue on it now because it's kind of muddy right here, the color, where the brown is. Also need to darken it. Now I darken just the top part, leave the lower part light. Okay. Now I'm going to go back into the brown again with this side. Okay. I'm kind of pushing it on this side because it's still a little bit wet and I don't want to disturb the paint that's underneath. For layering, you really need to allow the paint to dry in between the layers. And we are kind of layering this paint with the light watercolor layers. A little bit like the China paint layers where we fire in between. We don't have to fire this. It dries fairly quickly. I got a little bit, I'm not liking the color here too much because I'm seeing the brown. It looks brown. It doesn't look like a deep shadow. It looks like brown paint, so I'm gonna work in more blue. Right there. Just going over the rim of the iris a little. Okay, I'm putting a little bit more of that more brilliant blue, just touches here and there. Just to give it a little more luminosity. Another thing I sometimes do is add some details with the opaque white or light color. Let's try that. I don't know if these eyes actually need that right now, but I just wanted to demonstrate it. So we take some of our opaque color. Sometimes I use white, sometimes I use smoked pearl, sometimes I add a little bit of color to the white. But I'm just going to try adding a little bit of just the plain smoked pearl. Again, going into the retarder and blotting and picking up paint with the tip of the brush. And it's possible that maybe I really need to use my script liner for this, but we'll just see how this brush does. Making some very fine lines. Just creating a little more texture and detail. See how I try the stroke on my hand or my fingernail so I don't get too much paint when I put it down on the piece. I'm just a fiend for detail. I don't know if you can see that. I'm going to zoom in, see if you can see those lines. They're very subtle. Oop. Okay. Now, you might want to check the whites and see how they're holding up. You can correct this edge, the outer edge of the rim, and whiten and clean up the white part of the eye at the same time. Whoop. Okay. Give it a little more highlight. I'm going to darken the pupils a little bit more. Put on another layer of the black, my deep carbon black. I can put a lot of water in that paint and still get black paint. I'm just going to deepen the middle of the and then deepen the shadow at the top. Okay. Oops. While I'm at it, I'm darkening the base of some of those eyelashes and the lash line. Couldn't resist doing that. Okay, let's see. It's hard for me to see what I'm doing while I'm holding the head under the camera, so I'm going to take a little break and take a closer look, but I think this head is almost done, almost ready for the glaze technique, and that'll be the next demo. Stay tuned. I'm going to put a light coat of Porcelain Restoration glaze on my head before I glaze the eyes. It'll give it a nice sheen and protect the color. I'm going to use a sponge and a clean brush. Everything has to be really clean because of the dust problem. I dusted this head off with a clean mop, and I mixed some of the restoration glaze with just a little bit of water. I think I'm going to mix up a little more here. It's less water than glaze, just a little bit to loosen it up so it'll flow on. It gives it a little bit of texture, but I like the texture. It looks like skin. And I'm going to apply it with a sponge so I don't get so much on at one time. I'm just going to paint a little bit on the sponge and then apply it one area at a time. I want to make sure I get around the eyes, and then tamp with the dry end of the sponge. Make sure you tamp all the way around those edges. I guess I'm just going to do the rest of the face, but you get the idea. Be back later to do the eyes. Oh, come on. Where's that button? I just did the porcelain restoration glaze, and it's already dry. It dries really quickly. I wonder if it's too soon to check for dust, because I've got a big piece of dust or hair or something right here in the middle of her forehead. So I'm just gonna take my toothpick and dislodge it by just barely tickling the surface. That's how I get rid of dust. And next I'm going to use some satin varnish, and I'll talk about the matte varnish and the Judikins diamond glaze to finish glazing. Be right back. I just want to tell you a little bit about something that happened a little bit ago. This is a warning. You remember that I was shading the lips and I used a little bit of light blue? Well, I was too hasty in doing that, and I didn't water down the color enough, and probably I should have added the blue to some of the purple matter instead of just using straight blue, but I ended up with a color that was too gray and muddy looking in this part of the mouth. So I've fixed it and it's better, but I just want to warn you. I mean, it's whenever you add color, it's better to water it down so much that you can barely see it at first, and then build it up with multiple layers until it looks right. Because once you put too much color on and you're not happy with it, it's difficult to take it off. You can kind of lighten it, but then it takes everything off, and then you got to make a repair. But so I did that. I kind of lightened the part that I didn't like, and then went back with some other color, with more of the purple matter in it and the blue, a little bit of blue, and I just built it up again. So it's better, it's acceptable, but it was really bothering me. So I had to fix that, and I had to tell you about it. So you'll just be careful and water your paint down a lot and build it up gradually. That's my advice for today. Thanks. Let me tell you a little bit about Jo Sonjas varnishes. They have satin varnish, matte varnish, and gloss varnish. I never use the gloss. I use the satin or the matte. And I just wanted to mention that the matte varnish actually is not, in my opinion, a true matte. It has a little bit of a satin sheen to it. So it's kind of up to you how much shine you want on your doll. I use it on the lips and on the white part of the eyes. And sometimes it seems like maybe the satin varnish is just a little bit too shiny. So I don't know, maybe mixing it together would be the best. But it's what you experiment and you decide which one you prefer. I'm going to put a little bit of both in my palette and use a little bit of both to do the lips. If I can just remember which is which, I'll put the satin here. And I'll put the matte over here. Satin, matte. Okay. All right. I want most of the highlight, or most of the shine, to be on the lower lip. I'd rather not have the upper lip be shiny, so I'm going to put the matte varnish up on the lower lip, on the upper lip, I mean. And then I'm going to take my liner and apply some matte varnish to give the lips a little bit of texture. But I'm going to cover the whole area with these little vertical strokes. And then right in the middle, I'm going to add some satin varnish where I want the most highlight. And I'm going to leave a little bit of space between the strokes. I'm not going to go all the way to the ends. Now, I'm going to put some of the satin varnish on this point in the eye, in the whites of the eye. I didn't talk about that little pink thing. I forget what they call it. It's not a tear duct, but the way I paint that is whenever I have maybe some lip color or something in my brush, I'll take my liner and I'll outline that and soften it and maybe do that enough times to get the color I want. Put a little satin along there. Alright, I'm going to let that dry, and then I'm going to come back and show you how I do the Judikins diamond glaze on the eyeball, on the iris. Stay tuned. Okay, I'm ready to put the eye glaze, the first coat of eye glaze, on my painted head, the painted eyes, with the Judikins diamond glaze. And for this I use a good brush because I need precision. I'm using a Winsor Newton. Let's zoom in. Winsor Newton Series 7. This is a miniature 0. A regular 0 would probably be fine, but this is what I have. It's a little bit thicker than the triple aught that I used for painting the very detailed painting. I need a little bit thicker brush to get the glaze on. So this is the brush I'm going to be using. It's a very precise operation. Just put a little in my dish. before I load the brush, I put it in the water and blot it well, just so it's, I'm not sure why I do that, but it seems like a good idea with this stuff. I don't want it drying up too fast in the brush. So, to load the brush, just pick up as much of the glaze as possible. Don't work it too much because it tends to form air bubbles, and if you get an air bubble while you're painting, you need to scoop it up with the tip of the brush or however you can get it off. And I like to start in the middle because I kind of pile it up in the middle. And then get a little more and just kind of, and then work it to the edges. And the edge stops before you touch the lids, because if you touch the lid, that glaze is going to run into that channel and you'll ruin the shape. You're trying to develop a lens shape. If you do touch the lid and the glaze runs into the channel, you can correct it. A toothpick works really well for cleaning out the channel and reshaping the lens. I like to hold the head this way while I'm doing this lid, and then turn it this way to do the other lid. Starting in the middle and just working it with an up and down motion toward the edges. I'm just kind of piling it on and sculpting it as I go. I'm going to have to take a close look here and see if I've got any air bubbles forming. There's something going on there. It's a little bit like sculpting with liquid. And that is the first coat on that eye. And this will be repeated three times, and maybe more, depending on how it goes. Okay, I'll do the other eye real quick here. Pile it up in the middle. And don't work it too much. I see an air bubble there on the tip of my brush. I don't want that, so loading the brush again. All the way out to the edge. Cover that edge on the side. Kind of keeping it pushed back towards the middle. So most of the glaze is in the middle because we're shaping a lens shape over the iris. Okay, and that's the first coat, and now I think you have the idea, and you can repeat that as many times as you think is necessary for a nice lens shape. Thanks for watching. One more thing I want to mention, always be sure to keep your head propped so that the eyes are at a horizontal position so that the glaze doesn't run. Just wanted to mention that. Thanks for watching.